Hey, I'm recording this in early February 2025, and I'm going to show you some segments from something that was recorded in either late January or early February 2025. It's all a blur to me, but it was very recent. And listen, these guys are good guys. Jeffrey Tucker of the Brownstone Institute, uh, Del Bigtree of ICANN. Now, they've never had me on their shows. They never respond to any of my email. I'm not happy about that. I'm going to talk about that as we go into this because that's not right and that's not good. But anyway, this is Jeffrey Tucker talking about his experience with the early days of COVID and what I call the COVID panic. I also call it the COVID con. Uh, and we're going to see where he was at, and we're going to compare to where he was at to where Check was at. And he was an early runner. He was a forerunner. He was one of the first people to get it. But you'll see the timing of this. And if you have any influence over these guys, they should really be looking at what the nurses saw right now and not ignoring it, which they actively are. So anyway, here we go.
We have not yet had a serious national reckoning with what's happened to us over the last 5 years. We're still very traumatized by this experience. And this is the backdrop that was not really acknowledged in the hearings.
Yeah.
That vast numbers of Americans are very confused about what happened to our country. Why did we throw away 500 years of rights and liberties and expectations? And
Yeah.
why did the Bill of Rights just suddenly vanish for us overnight? Why do we engage in this strange ritualistic hiding from an infectious disease for so long, and then have the antidote presented to us, universalized even for the people who are not vulnerable to any kind of medically significant effects from infection?
Yeah.
Why do we conflate cases and exposure?
Right.
Why did we do all this stuff and then distribute a product that was at best wildly exaggerated in its effectiveness, and everything was put into this? This will cure you. This will fix us. This will get us out of the pandemic. And we get 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 5, and so on. It went.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it became obvious to people that this was not just. It wasn't helping. It wasn't fixing the problem. It was actually creating a lot of damage.
And that was Jeff Tucker of Brownstone Institute talking with Del Bigtree of ICANN. And they were early, but I want to show you how early you could have been if you were reading our tweets. This is from February 1st, not March, not April, not May, February 1st, 2020. Still missing from news reports. Wuhan is the capital of the most polluted province in the most polluted country in the world. Yes, a respiratory flu is going to kill older people already in poor health, which is the exact profile of those dying. This was known and knowable February 1st, 2020. So the reason you didn't know this was the mainstream news media was lying and the alternative news media was, taking a nap. Next tweet, same day, just a few minutes later, my assessment, it's a real flu. Now, we could have a whole conversation about that, but we'll just let that pass. But the idiot news media is being led like puppets on a string by the vaccine industry to sell more flu shots and prepare the way for a coronavirus vaccine, which is already close and is being fast tracked, i.e., less science, more speed. You can see this on Twitter. They froze my account. I can't post, I can't interact with Twitter anymore since 2021. But if you go to my Twitter, Ken McCarthy, and you look at these dates, they're posted. So I nailed it February 1st, 2020. Anybody who had the information could have done this. The mainstream media could have done this. Many of the so-called alternative news media could have done it. They didn't. And I hope next time something like this happens, instead of not giving me airtime, I will get airtime.
So the credibility, think about it, Del, you know this, but the credibility of the whole, what we call the establishment, was resting on the workability of these injections.
Yes.
The media, big tech, public health, government, everything, academia, everything you think of as the commanding heights of society, the credibility of all those things rested on the workability of this one innovative, untested product. Dissenters were shouted down. They were canceled. They were fired.
Yeah.
Our communities were shattered. Businesses destroyed.
I mean, even before the vaccine arrived.
No, that's
I mean, when you saw like people like out there, Fauci, all of them celebrating a vaccine that was just barely getting into phase 3 trial, coming out and saying, "We love what we're seeing." I'm like, why does a regulatory agency have pom-poms out, excited about a product that they're promising is going on the market before it's even gotten through its phase 3, efficacy trial, safety trial? Like, what are we talking about?
What are we talking about? And then the incantation that we all had to say that it was safe and effective.
Right.
So I was mentioning to you, I was mentioning to you earlier at some point, and by the way, I got into this whole thing because I was so outraged by the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I had been writing about pandemic planning since 2005.
Okay, I was going to ask you when you got into
well,
this.
I got into it with the initial George W. Bush scheme about how to deal with the bird flu.
Okay.
He gave a press conference in 2005, and he said, "Don't worry, we're going to shut your businesses, your schools. We're going to close everything. The government's going to deliver you groceries. You just hide, and everything's going to be fine." And I remember watching that press conference. It was an alternative CDC plan that they passed, and thinking, this guy is out of his mind. Where did this crazy theory come from? And I began to write about it. I said, if they ever attempt anything like this, the government will never be the same. We'll never be the same. You will destroy society, and you will destroy science. And I wrote that article in 2005. Well, I had to wait 15 years for it to become a reality.
Right.
But when I saw it all unfold, I thought, the crazy people have taken over.
Yeah.
And so I wrote my first article on January 27th, 2020. I said, I'm not saying they're going to do this, but people should know that there are some crazy people who believe that it's possible to shut down the whole social functioning to protect you from a respiratory virus. Just letting you know. And I remember getting calls from people that they had me on radio shows at the time, because this sounds like an alarmist prediction.
Yeah.
Like, why would you say something like that? And I had to assure people, they were saying, are you saying that they're going to throw away the Bill of Rights and throw us all in our homes and lock us in our homes and quarantine the whole population? I said, look, I'm not saying they're going to do that. All right? I'm just saying that there are some crazy people who think that you can solve an infectious disease problem this way.
Right.
And I said, I'm just saying we need to address the problem that some people believe this is possible. Not predicting that, but just like it's weird.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And it was about 2 weeks into the lockdowns that my phone, and I was screaming about this, from March 8th when they shut down South by Southwest, and then from March 12th when the travel restrictions came in. March 13th is when the national emergency was declared, and March 16th, that's when they ordered all the bars and restaurants and public spaces closed from the CDC, and a tiny footnote on a PDF.
Chill. I have to say, I haven't really walked through this that much detail.
It's so bad, and then
I can't. I mean,
it was so crazy at dark times, and I didn't know what was happening to the world. March 16th was that press conference where Trump got up and said, he seemed to be a little ambiguous about the lockdowns. Yeah. He wasn't sure. He just said, look, we're all going to unite as a nation to defeat coronavirus. And then Birx gets up, and a reporter asks her, are you saying that all the bars and restaurants need to close? And she kind of didn't really answer the question. Yeah. Fauci shoved her off stage and then reads her the footnote in tiny print on the page 2 of the PDF that says all bars and restaurants and all places where people gather, meaning weddings and funerals and everything else, church services, need to close. Okay. Then he sits down and eyes her. She winks at him. They smile together like they're co-conspirators. Trump, meanwhile, somebody had distracted him in the audience. He was waving at them and almost like he didn't hear what Fauci said.
Yeah.
So it was a weird time. And about 2 weeks later, I get this phone call. And I was screaming about it. I'm sure you were too. We all were, but we didn't know each other back in those days. And so my phone rings, And the guy on the other end of the phone was introduced himself as Rajiv Venkaya. Now, I knew Rajiv Venkaya because he was the bioweapons defense guy working at the White House under George W. Bush, who originally came up with the idea of lockdowns. Mm-hmm. And who was now working for a vaccine company. I should have put two and two together, Dale. I didn't. And he's on the phone. He says, Jeffrey, your articles, you really need to stop writing this stuff.
Wow.
You really need to shut up about the lockdowns. I said, but weird things are happening. I mean, the hometowns are being destroyed. The businesses are being closed. People walking around like they're dressed like medieval flagellants. This is insane.
Yeah.
You're destroying everything. Why would you do this? And he said, look, you need to trust us. We know what we're doing. And I said, well, look, I have one question for you. Just one question. Just answer my question. First of all, I'm not going to shut up. It is a free country. I have free speech and so on. At least I thought it was.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize how effective.
Well, you were using it while it lasted.
Yeah. Right. And so I said, look, I just have one question for you, and it's a simple question: where does the virus go? We all hide from it.
Yeah.
We give our press conferences. The media is against it. Fauci
Goes back to the planet it came from.
Yeah,
Hops on his spaceship.
Jumps into a big hole in the ground, hides. Oh, I didn't know they were going to do that. I realized the CDC was coming after me. I better get out of here. Yeah, gets on a spaceship or something.
Right.
And he said, but listen, that's a smart question. Smart question. He said, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to drive the R naught down below 1. And that will eventually make it fall to 0. And I said, Rajiv, you have confused. You're not a stupid man. You've confused cause and effect. That's like saying I'm going to stop the rain by taking it on my umbrella. That is a dumb thing you just said.
Yeah,
that's a measure of reality. It's not a causal agent causing reality to conform. That's crazy. He goes, okay, well, good point. But actually, if the truth be told, just between you and me, we're going to have a vaccine. This was 2 weeks into lockdowns. So I said, I laughed. I said, Rajiv, you're not going to have a vaccine. First of all, there's never been a vaccine. First of all, we don't need one
for respiratory,
for respiratory.
COVID, all this,
things can mutate too quick. This is not a virus
Yeah.
against which you can vaccinate. And if you somehow magically have some wonderful technology to do so, it would take 10, 15 years to test to make sure it's safe and effective. And are you telling me we're going to stay locked down for 10, 15 years?
Oh my God.
And he said, it's not going to take that long.
Yeah.
And I said, and there's this long pause. And I said, oh, well, thanks very much, Rajiv. And you know what, Del, here's what I thought, because I'm naive. I thought he was a crazy person. I thought he was a has-been, some pundit, hanging out at some vaccine company, had no idea what he was talking about, and he was just saying crazy things and nothing better to do on a Wednesday afternoon than call me. Hung up the phone and dismissed it.
Wow.
And it took me 2 years to realize he told me the whole scheme. Right there on the phone, the inventor of pandemic planning, who had been hanging around in these ruling class circles for the previous 15 years, had just told me the whole plan, and I just dismissed it because I didn't make the connection. I didn't realize what they were doing was locking it down until they could distribute this product. I didn't know that was the scheme, and it took me a long time to figure it out.
All right. So did you hear that? Jeffrey Tucker was told in the spring of 2020 that they were going to have a vaccine in a year. He thought it was crazy and dismissed it. He said it took him 2 years to figure out what happened. Well, you saw my tweet from earlier. And here's another tweet I'm going to read for you. This is the one that got my Twitter account frozen. You can see it. They were nice enough to leave the account up so you can see all my timestamp statements. But it's frozen. Everybody thinks Elon Musk is going to let everybody back on Twitter. Good luck. If you have something real to say, you're not going to find yourself on Twitter. All right, so here we go. This is March 12th, 2021. This is before Jeffrey Tucker figured out what was going on. This is a year before. So I posted this. One of the countless legions of journalistic shills who sold the, quote, need for the vaccine back in March of 2020 and helped normalize the idea of deploying inadequately tested invasive biotechnology on hundreds of millions and calling it a vaccine. So March 12th, 2021, and I was calling out that link points to a specific so-called journalist. And this got me instantly banned. I posted this, and less than 30 seconds later, I was gone. And I have appealed, like an idiot. I appealed through their online process half a dozen times. They don't even respond. And I even sent a certified letter to their legal department. No answer. So I want to just break this down for you. Countless legions of journalistic shills. Well, we know who they were. There were countless of them, right? And what were they selling? Shill has to sell something. They were selling the need for a vaccine back in the March of 2020, which I pointed out in February was exactly what they were doing. And what else were these shills doing? And this is really important. They were helping normalize, it's a key word, the idea of developing inadequately tested, okay? Vaccines need 5 to 10 years to be proven safe. There's no way you can develop a safe vaccine in 1 year. But thanks to the journalistic shills, and I called one out here in this tweet with a link right to his article, he was patting himself on the back in March 2021 for being a genius and knowing that the vaccines were coming. Well, now we know how he knew the vaccines were coming. He knew the vaccines were coming because one of the criminals in government told him they were coming. So he and others helped normalize the idea of developing inadequately tested, invasive biotechnology. Not a vaccine. No, this was not a standard vaccine. Any mainstream news media outlet could have known that. Any alternative news person could have known that. This was not a vaccine, as we pointed out. And putting this invasive biotechnology into hundreds of millions of people and calling it a vaccine. So I published that on March 2021, and apparently Jeffrey Tucker, head of, I bring him up because they've got all my books. They've got What the Nurses Saw, they've got Fauci's First Fraud, and they're not interested, okay? But according to his own admission in this interview, I was a year ahead of him on knowing that this scam was being sold to the American public. So anyway, does this matter? I don't know. But I would say this, if it's a choice between listening to Jeffrey Tucker, or I would dare say Del Bigtree and Brass Check, you might give us the edge because we got it right. And here they are in 2025, patting themselves on the back and still not talking about the hospital murders, by the way, What the Nurses Saw. It's 2025, guys. Wake up.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.